Hello everyone, and welcome back to our series on API security topic. In our last video, we learned about API security fundamentals, its importance in digital transformation, and also we saw certain best practices to implement, monitor, test the API security. And one of the critical component of API security is API security platforms. We saw a couple of platforms like App Sentinels, No Name, Salt, and understood why they are required in spite of having the best practices of API security being implemented, as well as having an API platforms. But our today's topic is going to be deep diving into API security training. I am thankful to Puneet, who is the founder and CEO of App Sentinels, for his contribution. He has contributed with more than half an hour of pointed and deep dive into API security training. So let's do a deep dive with Puneet. Welcome, Puneet, and over to you.
Thanks for joining our session, our workshop on API security. So I'm Puneet Tutliani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of App Sentinels. And with me, I have my co-founder, Mr. Mohit Joshi, who is the CTO and co-founder of the company. Now, we all know that, APIs are core. Every single organization, when they do any digital transformation, they are building and exposing their APIs. And while the organizations are building the APIs and they deploy those APIs, there is a long cycle of the APIs, and the entire cycle has to be thought through. We should call it as a dev to production view of APIs. So, from a foundational perspective, the first and the foremost, most important thing here is having some sort of a continuous discovery of APIs and having some sort of a posture management of APIs. One should know how many APIs they have and the posture of every single API, because every single API is unique and add a risk to an organization. The second and very critical pillar of API security is in the shift left, organization should be doing continuous security testing of their APIs. This is one of the most critical area where almost every single organization that we have spoken to is lagging and struggling. But this is extremely important and critical. And moving on, when the code moves to production, APIs are exposed to variety of attacks. So a multi-layer defense in depth strategy for API protection at runtime is needed. And moving on, the last but not the least, as I said, right, API security has a very strong shift left aspects as well as a very strong protection aspects, right? So the remediation of API issues are unique in that sense, because they should target the developers. They should also target the security operations team. Uh, so this is a comprehensive view of API security, and every single organization which is thinking of, addressing the challenges of API security should think not on a piecemeal basis, but a comprehensive approach is needed. You can still start piece by piece depending on the maturity of the organization and the resources and the risk that organization is exposed to. But still, every single security practitioner should think of a longer term view of API security and should keep all of these four pillars in mind when they think of any initiatives with respect to protecting their APIs. Now, first and foremost, as I said, right, discovery is important. You cannot protect what you don't know. And as a security practitioners, one should know how many APIs they have. You should always have an up-to-date and a complete inventory of APIs. This is not a small problem. In our experience, when we speak to the clients, almost every single organization is struggling against this problem, because API sprawl is a very big issue. Developers and product teams keep adding new APIs without following every time the right processes or checklist, and hence ensuring that there is a comprehensive view of every single API and inventory is important. This inventory should cover all kind of applications that organization has exposed on the internet, whether these are new applications or these are old legacy applications. All kind of application architectures should also be covered. as well as all protocols and API ingress paths should be covered. So if an organization has not one but multiple cloud instances or data centers or hybrid environments, wherever the APIs can enter the organization perimeter, those should all be covered to provide a very comprehensive view. There should not be any blind spots left. Whenever you are planning to do API discovery or API inventory, any tool that you select should provide a comprehensive coverage of variety of application architectures and different kind of deployment methods. As an organization, as a security practitioners, one should know when a new API is being introduced. You should have notifications and integrations in the way you want to consume those, whether you want to see an email or you want to see a Slack message. Those workflows and integrations should be supported. So you and your team members should know when a new API has been added or possibly an API has been modified, because each of these could be a potential risk to the organization. So these two are very critical from an inventory perspective. Then if you think of APIs, right, every single API is unique, and hence you need to know what risk every single API adds to the organization, so that if you have 20 APIs to look after, you can go after the APIs which are higher risk to the organization. So from that perspective, there are different elements of risk quantifications that are applicable on APIs. You may have shadow APIs. These are APIs which are implemented, but you or the organization does not have a proper inventory or documentation, but these are still quite prevalent, quite used in the organization. So these are important. So the tool or whatever mechanism you want to go for building your discovery should ensure that shadow APIs are discovered and brought to notice to the security practitioners. Orphaned APIs are APIs which are implemented, but because of the change in the development teams or product teams, because of the sort of churn there, now there is no owner of such APIs, and hence there won't be anybody available if there is a problem in such API. So there has to be some mechanism a security practitioner should have, where there should be an ownership of every single API. There should not be any API which does not have an owner. So understanding, discovering whether API is owned or not owned is extremely important. Unused APIs, these are APIs which were prevalent, but no more being used. They are inactive kind of APIs. Organization, and as a security practitioner, you should know that such APIs are just lurking around, and if these are touched ever again, a right tool will inform the security practitioners that these APIs are being tried by somebody, and practitioners can do a validation or a check if that's a valid access or not. Then further, whether the APIs are authenticated or unauthenticated, whether they are open to public or they are only meant for internal use, whether these APIs deal with any kind of sensitive data. They may have request or responses, and there could be any kind of a sensitive information like PCI, PHI, EMR records that are part of these APIs. So you should know those APIs. When a data exfiltration happen, many times the malicious actors would try to target such APIs. You should also know privilege and critical APIs in your environment. These are APIs which are primarily meant for account kind of operations like sign-ups, sign-ins, payment APIs. These are some privileged workflows within the organization. Whenever you discover the entire inventory, you should make sure that all of these risks are quantified for every single API, so you can evaluate, understand the risk of every single API. So this is primarily around the discovery part. On the posture management, now the posture management is more of a hygiene related things. These are, I would say, non-negotiables to a certain extent. Organization should make sure that there is an automated mechanism to check if these APIs are not having any issues with respect to governance, or any issues with respect to configuration of secure configuration of these APIs, or if there are any deviations from the best practices of these APIs. So, there has to be, again, similar to a continuous discovery, there should be continuous mechanisms where, the posture of these APIs should be checked. It should not be a one-time effort, because, if tomorrow one API is changed, you may still end up having an exposed API with basic security checks missing. Further, authentication and authorization are critical aspects in APIs. So our recommendation is that organization should implement right auth architectures, schemes like OAuth 2 or OpenID connects. Ideally, recommendation is to use JWT tokens or similar widespread mechanisms or protocols. Do avoid using custom tokens because there are many attacks which can be detected if it's a JWT like replay kind of attacks. You would be able to detect on a JWT, but when it comes to custom tokens, the insights are missing. So if you have a security tool, it won't be able to kind of figure out what's going on. Then it's also recommended that you implement some sort of a centralized authentication architecture for all your APIs. Whenever the APIs or wherever these APIs are coming from, variety of ingress paths, they should all land up in a centralized place where it should be validated that this API is authenticated, and only then it should be forwarded. It should not happen that authenticated APIs in some path or other are allowed inside without having authentication. So these are some of the important things. Authentication, authorization is obviously the number one thing for APIs. Encryption and data protection is another important thing. So make sure that these APIs are TLS or MTLS enabled so that man in the middle attacks are not possible. You should use stronger authentications and algorithms for protecting your APIs. Key management is another important aspect. Make sure that API secrets, API keys, and credentials are secure. They are rotated on time at a regular frequency. Further, input validations are important. So, make sure that every input to your APIs are validated and sanitized before it's used. Rate limiting is important control on APIs. So, implementing rate limiting to make sure that APIs are not being abused is critical and important. And further, API security controls, like, ensuring that proper cookie configurations are there, they are secured, there is a protection against CORS attack or CSRF sort of attacks are possible and enforced on the APIs. But these are all table stakes. These are hygienes. These are not very complicated. What you need is a right tool which can do this side of a validation on a continuous basis and raise tickets against the developers if there is any deviation from these practices. There are few more like APIs should not expose sensitive data in the tokens or in URLs, which again are add-ons that the tool that one should adopt should have. Moving on, let me take you through the OWASP API Top 10 2023, and why this is important is that if you really see all the 10 controls that OWASP API Top 10 recommended, there is a very interesting mix and emphasis on the shift left part as well as the protection part. If you see all the blue color controls, things like broken object level authorization, broken authentication, broken object property level authorization, or broken function level authorization, or for that matter, security misconfiguration and improper inventory management. These are all having a very strong shift left aspects. And I would also say that the primary ownership here lies with the development or the product teams of the organization. What as a security practitioner one should look at is there should be right tool which can help the product teams build secure APIs and address some of these issues or controls at the early stage of the development as part of the CI/CD pipelines. At the same time, the OSP API Top 10, is also sort of bringing to the surface the importance of protection and the challenges of protection of these APIs, right? Things like unrestricted resource consumption is nothing but an abuse of APIs. It may not have a vulnerability, but it can still be misused. It can still be abused for unwanted purpose. Then API 6, as you can see, unrestricted access to sensitive business flows. These are again, protection level aspects. SSRF protection is also, something which is more towards the protection aspects. And the unsafe consumption of APIs, which again points to somebody abusing the APIs even if they don't have a vulnerability. These are all important aspects from a security practitioner perspective, and I would say that here the primary responsibility is on the security practitioners to ensure that these APIs are protected at the runtime when they are deployed in production. Now, further to this, right, we talked about the discovery and the posture management. The second pillar, as you saw in out of the four pillars, are the continuous pen testing. This is one of the weakest area across all organizations that we have spoken to, because organizations are in a continuous journey of building new and new APIs. They are actually struggling to test happy path scenarios, and obviously in all of this, the security testing is getting left out. What organizations should look at and security practitioners should look at is the right tool, right platform, which can perform continuous pen testing of these APIs. How it should go about it? First of all, it should understand the applications, how the application workflows are happening. It should test application workflows. It should not test APIs as a stateless entity, but it should be able to do continuous stateful testing of APIs. And it should test both authentication and authorization flows, like testing APIs for different auth schemes, testing APIs without tokens or with null algorithms or with expired tokens, ensuring that every object and every resource that is being accessed has the right authorization control to test against Ebola and IDOR. And similarly, making sure that the function level authorization controls are rightly put up. If there are no broken RBAC or broken user access controls left out during the testing. So, these are some important aspects. And then continuing on that, there should be mechanisms to test whether the APIs are leaking out excessive data or any sensitive data. Are they handling any unknown parameters or new parameters which are not seen regularly in the APIs? Are there any hidden methods or endpoints which are not exposed, but because somebody just kept it there, and the framework, the coding framework actually supports it, are those are lurking risk for the organizations. And also testing APIs against brute forcing and rate limiting for important workflows. Uh, to double click on all of these points, so your testing platform that you are selecting as a security practitioners, you would have to work with your product teams to kind of collaboratively identify the right tool. But this tool should perform session aware test. It should not do stateless single API test. It should test with right authorization tokens, right cookies, and it should test the workflows or the chain of APIs, not just one API at a time. It should evaluate the object ownership access with multiple users, right? Whether there is if you have a marketplace application and there is a cart, it should make sure that cart is only accessible to the right owner. If any other owner or user tries to access that cart, it should not be allowed. Those kind of object level authorization controls should be validated. Function level access control should be validated. So if I have to extend the argument of marketplace, if you have a buyer role and a seller role, a buyer role should not be able to call the seller API. So that's something which the tool should be able to understand and test on its own, because security engineers or the quality assurance teams of the organization may or may not be testing all of these things comprehensively. The tool should have pagination controls, whether excessive data exposures are possible on APIs. It should be able to guess potential mass assignment inputs. It should test for authentication bypass, token reuse, token replace, weak JWT signatures, etc. It should test for potential crashes, double freeze, use after fee. I would also call all of these as a denial of service test, rate limit test. It should do resource injection test. It should perform resource limit test. It should also check for sensitive data, etc. So a comprehensive testing platform is needed for the organization to make sure that APIs, whenever they are tested comprehensively for a variety of flaws that can happen on APIs. And ideally, this should be all automatic. It should be continuous, which should not require a human being sitting and doing this test, but it should do all of these tests automatically, including creation of these test cases and running of these test cases. So moving on, let me talk about briefly on the threat detection and mitigation part. As I said, right, API security is a complex piece, right from discovery, posture management, continuous testing, which are mostly the shift left part. Now we are moving towards the protection part. Now, API security actually combines some interesting principles of network security, data security, user analytics, and application behavior analytics. And I'll talk a little bit further on this. So our from recommendation from App Sentinels on the suggested guardrails is that you need to have a multi-layer protection for runtime. A single layer protection just for APIs, checking certain things on APIs is not going to work. What you need is a very comprehensive view where you should be able to perform client and user level controls like checking for low reputation users, or users not expected to come from certain geographies, or coming from VPNs and proxies. You should have some controls around that. You should then have at a next level, you should look for HTTP level controls to block attacks like smugglings and path traversals, etc. Then you should look at API schema conformance, where if APIs are not conforming to the right schemas, you should be able to block those. You should also be able to kind of detect log4j kind of attacks and protect those, or SQL injection kind of attacks. You should be able to protect against those. And last but not the least is application business logic control. So this is one part I'm going to be covering in a couple of slides from now. But you need a complete layered approach to security for runtime protection. Just a single layer is never sufficient. And you need to look at the clients. You need to look at the protocol from a network security perspective. You need to look at API schemas, what's coming in, what's going out, different kind of attacks that may be possible, and finally on the business logic kind of controls. So further on this, right, we talked about the business logic attacks. What is required, and there are very interesting examples that I want to kind of share with all of you. Coinbase is one of the largest crypto trading platform, and just 2 years back, Coinbase had to actually suspend their trading and stop taking new orders because a white hat hacker reported to Coinbase base that he is able to sell crypto that he does not own. Now, that was actually a business logic attack on the application, on the Coinbase application. Uh, what the hacker was able to do was bypass the most foundational business logic check. There have been many, many more examples, like think of Uber, where a couple of years back, a user was able to change the balance of his account by using an API he was not authorized to use. It was more of a broken function level authorization control where he called an API which was updating the balance in somebody's account. And he was able to enjoy free rides in Uber for many, many years. So, these are very important business logic related attacks which are possible on APIs, and they need to be protected. So the platform that you select as a security practitioner should build a deep understanding of how this application is functioning, what are the different workflows it supports, and then it should be able to protect these workflows. So that's the first and the most foundational layer of security that APIs use. Um, if you see the second part, APIs are also exposed to the automated attacks, as you saw in the OAuth API top 10. Unrestricted access or abuse of APIs is very common. And in that light, OWASP had, a couple of years back come up with OWASP Automated Threats Protection, OAT Top 21. So, these are very important attacks, and most of the hackers these days are actually using APIs to carry on such attacks. To protect against such attacks, the platform should actually build a deeper understanding of the device, the user, or the partners, and the application workflow patterns, right? And then it should be able to protect against attacks like ATOs, carding attacks, coupon cracking attacks. These are also attacks which actually happen on the business logic of the application. So, combining the first and second are extremely important. So, a tool which is understanding how the right payment method looks like, or if somebody is applying a coupon or a voucher, how that voucher workflow looks like. If somebody is repeatedly trying to apply vouchers, it is a incorrect business workflow. So a platform should be able to detect such things, right? So this is the second layer of protection that you need. The third layer of protection that you need is anomaly detection for critical APIs. Obviously there are important APIs like account APIs, voucher, payment, sensitive data APIs. The platform should monitor the usage of these APIs with respect to how many times these APIs have been called, success, failures, data transfers that are going on through APIs, and it should be detecting outliers here. So protection against data exfiltration attempts, protection against data scraping attempts are something which are possible outcomes of this layer of security for your APIs. Moving on, the fourth point, the schema auditing and conformance. As I said in the beginning, you may have shadow APIs, you may have inactive APIs. You need to control those, right? I mean, as a security practitioner, I would definitely like shadow APIs not to be allowed if I don't know that these APIs are not documented, or if there was an API which was inactive, I want to definitely make sure that I have a control on those APIs. So you need controls on the schemas. You need to know that if APIs are not conforming to the schema, I want to block it, you should be able to block it, right? So that's the fourth layer of security in the guardrails. The fifth layer of security is what is a OAS top 10 or core rule set, or a WAF typically provides protection against SQL injection, path traversals, LFI, RFI, HTTP protocol level attacks, right? That's the fifth layer. And the sixth layer is on the client protection, where you may have known bots, you may have bad reputations, IPs, you may have proxy Tors, browsers accesses, clients coming from these kind of sites. You should be able to sort of protect your applications against such kind of clients calling your APIs. So this is a very comprehensive 6 or 7 different layers of security that you need for your runtime protection, and that's all something which App Sentinels has in its portfolio. Now, let me talk about a little bit about the remediations. And remediation is a very challenging part when it comes to API security. Some being that when you think of an API attack, many times an API attack is not a single packet attack. It's a session level attack where some malicious activity has happened earlier in the session of the user, and the repercussion is seen quite late. So, ensuring that the right data is available, the right evidence is available in such scenario for the security analyst or even for the product teams when they would have to validate this is one of a very tough problem. So session level attacks is really a very tough thing for API, making the remediations quite challenging. Further, we have been saying this, that there is a very strong shift left aspects and there is a strong, obviously, protection aspects. For protection, primarily the security operations team are responsible. So the remediation workflows should address the challenges of security operations team on how they need to be enabled to block attacks promptly and precisely. Then you need workflows for your developers or product teams so that they are able to recreate the issues that are happening or reported, or the vulnerabilities in their local environment. They should be able to validate their fixes as well, right? So there should be focused workflow for developers, how they want to work, and the tool chains that they use, those should be supported. Then when you think of API attacks, you want to kind of block single APIs, or you want to block the threat actor or the IP address or the user which is responsible for such attacks. It's a very important call. uh, our general recommendation is that instead of blocking a single API, which could be a machine to machine or a human to machine, it's too complicated, can expose security practitioners to undue risk with respect to their business continuity. So it's always better that you look at blocking the users or the threat actors or the IPs that are responsible for those malicious activities, and hence correlation of these threat actors, because when a threat actor comes and attacks an application, he may have a much bigger charter in mind. He may have a complete agenda on what he wants to do, whether he wants to exfiltrate data, whether he wants to do business logic kind of thing, or he wants to run away with, say, certain financial thing. He want to do some payment frauds, right? So he would have a clear uh, charter or agenda in mind, and hence correlating variety of activities of a threat actor is very important. So these are some of the core challenges that any remediation platform, any API security platform that you look at with respect to the remediation should address. uh, so Further to this, if I talk about app sentinels and if I talk about the developers workflows that should be supported, right, the tool should have integrations with the developer tools, because developers may not want to come and log into a security platform and see or understand it. They want to kind of continue working in the tool that they do use day to day. So whether it is the ticketing systems like Jira or Git or any other CI/CD pipeline, they want to work with those. Right? There should be very comprehensive, actionable evidences that they should be provided with, because this is always a problem when somebody goes to the developers or product teams. They always would push back if they do not have the right evidence, to justify what logic and what API they may have built. And then they need help in recreation of the problems and validation of the issues in their own local environments. The accesses to staging and prod may not be available to everybody in the organization. So this is again one of the pain point that the remediation workflows targeting developers should address. And similarly, on the other side, for security operations team, as we said, right, correlation of threat actors, so that the big picture a threat actor is targeting, whether it's data exfiltration or some sort of a fraud or payment things, right? It is clear, and security operations team should be able to justify why certain action was taken, by providing all the right evidence to the stakeholders. The tool should have some sort of a manual and automated enforcement mode. You may not have large security operations team which are able to analyze all the events in real time and act on it. So it would help if instead of it being a reactive blocking that a security operations tool will do, the tool can do a proactive blocking and block these attacks before they can cause a damage to the organization. Uh, Further, when you actually deploy various components in your application stack, the sensor which is collecting the information is an important one. You should be able to block using these sensors. You should also be able to block the threat actors via integrations that may already be supported. So that's another important workflow that is needed. And then triaging of malicious issue in production when they are reported, collecting right evidences, and then working with the development team to get them fixed is a big, I would say, burden on security operations team. So the workflow of a security tool should actually try to address the last part as well. This is a very brief, reference architecture from Gartner, where they suggest that any API being exposed in the environment, right, any application which is exposed on the cloud, you should have a API discovery and protection right at the top. So all APIs should be discovered and should be protected by API security platform. And then they're also recommending that there should be API security tooling, which should be able to perform the security testing. And all of this, rather beyond this, is already provided by App Sentinels to its customers.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and also press the bell icon to stay notified of all the future released videos. See you in the next one. Thank you.